Welcome to episode 6 of the Can I Tell You Something podcast. This episode, we have something special in store. We have the most popular quiz of all time, the Myers-Briggs personality test.
Not more popular than Buzzfeed quizzes, I'd say.
I would say Buzzfeed quizzes as a concept, it's perhaps less popular than, but there is no one quiz that more people in the US have taken to assess their personalities, quite like the Myers-Briggs personality test.
Okay, so we will be doing a deep dive on that. And then in the second half of this episode, we have a bit of a proposal for a different type of quiz that we have written and created in-house. So we will share that with you all and why we even came up with this in the first place.
Yes, and if you have been enjoying the Can I Tell You Something podcast, please follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Can I Tell You Something podcast. That is Can I Tell You SMTH podcast. And let's get into the juice of it.
Let's do it.
All right. So just starting off, what do you know about the Myers-Briggs personality test?
So I didn't encounter Myers-Briggs until I went to college. I know I heard of it in high school, but I was never asked to take it until I think the first quarter of my freshman year in college. We did it in the dorms as a community bonding exercise or whatever, but I didn't have to do the exact test because it's pretty expensive. I did the free version, 16 personalities, which I think is slightly different than Myers-Briggs, but it's kind of the same idea. And I was INFJ.
Ooh.
And then in my senior year of college, I had to do it again, but the real Myers-Briggs test in a business class that we were forced to do it against our will. Again, INFJ. Didn't learn a whole lot from it. I remember the questions are just incredibly confusing. And sometimes it feels like you have to look up words that they're referencing. Like they're almost making it intentionally difficult. And I'm not sure why they do that, but
I'm very curious, considering what I found throughout my research. When you had to take the Myers-Briggs personality test in college, how much money did it cost? How many dollar bills?
So first I started with the digital test, which I think was $25. But then I never actually received the test in my inbox. So I had to call them personally to try and get it. And they said that I had to purchase it again because it didn't go through. So I ended up buying it twice. So that was $50. And then my professor alerted us that the digital version was not good enough and we had to get the paper version. So I had to go to the bookstore. And I think that was like $60, $75.
The bookstore version was $60 or $75.
At least.
Okay. Because I have some figures about how much it costs people to interact with the Myers-Briggs personality test. Those figures come from 2015. So there is a bit of there's like a time gap from then till now. And for all of you watching us, this is my little fun personality test notebook where I put all my show notes. I kind of created a fun booklet for it. But that being said, the interesting thing about what you said, $65 to take the test. In 2015 and 2012, it was reported that it was between $15 and $40 to take this test per individual.
And that, the reason mine was so expensive is maybe because it was at a university bookstore. I mean, everything is marked up there. So
Absolutely.
It still could be that, especially if like a corporation is buying it in bulk or something. But it just for an individual student, I spent over $100 trying to take this test because the free version was not acceptable.
And I think to really paint that picture too, I've never spent more on a course than that right there. The amount you spend on Myers-Briggs is more than I've spent on any course to acquire books.
That's not at all what my experience has been. I mean, that was it was a final course for business school. And the course itself was obviously $5,000. Then there was a $400 fee to take that course. on top of that, even though the course was required by every student. And then the on top Myers-Briggs test.
So you have to spend an additional $500 to take this course.
Right.
To graduate with a business degree.
Correct.
That's a bit sick and twisted, because once we get into the big picture numbers about Myers-Briggs, it's gonna paint an interesting picture. So
let's hear it.
Yeah, first let's get into the overall details with how Myers-Briggs works. So you took the paper test. I actually took the paper test as well after you did, because we had it lying around, and it is 93 questions. Yes.
Here she is.
There's the artifact.
It's a thick booklet.
It's a thick booklet. The test itself is like a little Scantron standardized test looking thing. So we're working with the source material here. This is canonical Myers-Briggs stuff. So the Myers-Briggs test is 93 questions, which is a lot. It's a bit insane.
That's what I remember is, for some reason, when I took it, I thought it would take me 5 or 10 minutes, but it took me a really long time because it felt like a final exam length.
Yeah. I don't even think that the ACT is as long as that in terms of questions per test. But you're scored on 4 different metrics. The first is either E or I, so extroversion or introversion. The second one is sensing and intuition. The third is thinking or feeling. The fourth is judging or perceiving. So you have 4 metrics. You have 2 potential possibilities for each metric, which gives you 16 personality types within this test. But you got to answer 93 questions first.
That's the only way you'll know your truest self.
Your truest self. And so here's the history behind why that test even exists to begin with. So it was developed by a mother and a daughter, neither of which have a degree in psychology. This was a passion project for them where they were trying to understand differences in personality types and be able to quantify them. It was at a time where people were really interested in quantifying things that were difficult to quantify. And so Briggs started research into personality in 1917. Then this guy, Carl Jung, published a book that talks about personality types, which really validated what Briggs was interested in. However, there are so many disclaimers in Carl Jung's book about using explicit personality types that were just blatantly overlooked when creating Myers-Briggs that it would be a disservice to Carl Jung to even say that he is at fault for creating Myers-Briggs. So that was published in 1923.
So was that his way of saying, I don't want involvement in this?
He was a psychologist that published something is all it really was. Like any great person with a PhD, they publish work, they talk about theories and ideas, and this was...
But you said that Myers-Briggs is not rooted in psychology. So what does he have to do with it?
So it's not rooted in psychology as in the academic institution of psychologists. It's rooted in psychology as in like cherry-picked bits of psychology literature that in combination validate what they're talking about. But most of it's based off of one book. And in that book, I think 2 of the metrics come out. You got like introversion, extroversion.
Long before ambiverts were even thought of or talked about.
Yeah. And the big thing too that he was saying in this book was like, hey, people don't exist in a binary. This is just to help kind of structure some thoughts around talking about personality types and tendencies.
Oh, Myers-Briggs 100% ignored that, because if any of you out there have taken this test, you know that there are 2 options for the test, and they are opposites of one another. There is no room for middle ground or a gray area, which all humans have.
Yes.
So it's when you're going through these 93 questions, a lot of them just feel impossible to answer. Like, I
because
think we should read off.
yeah,
some of
we
them.
should read off some of them. I'm going to go over the quick history timeline just so we can have some dates in mind. So the first time this thing was published was 1944. It was published as Briggs Myers Type Indicator Handbook. And then 12 years later in 1956, it was republished as Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is the MBTI that they use up until this day.
Mm-hmm.
There was a second edition published in 1985, and then a third edition published in 1998. So it's been going through editions and republishing for decades now. And it's started in the 1940s. So this thing has been around for a long time. And for some reason, we can't get rid of it.
Interesting.
So let's dive into some of the most, I guess, confusing questions.
Some of the silliest questions.
Yes.
So like you said, the test itself is broken into 4 parts. Part 1 is which answer comes closest to describing how you usually feel or act. And I'm going to just read some of the questions and you can give your answer. So the first question, when you go somewhere for the day, would you rather plan what you will do and when, or just go?
And to me, it's one of those questions where there's not enough information to be able to give an accurate answer. Like
every
where
day
are
is
you
different.
going? Like if I'm going camping, yeah, I think I want to plan it out a bit more.
And that's the thing is it's a lot of these are so ambiguous that you could answer either way for almost everything. Another example, are you usually a good mixer or rather quiet and reserved?
And
that's very situational.
It's incredibly situational. And we know that people will talk more in different environments and talk less in different environments.
At parties, do you sometimes get bored or always have fun?
What kind of party are we at? Like, these are the questions that are important when evaluating something like this.
But it only gets worse. So part 2 asks, which word in each pair appeals to you more? Think about what the words mean, not about how they look and how they sound. So this was what I was getting at earlier when I was saying sometimes the words don't even make sense together. And so you sometimes have to like look them up and figure out what they're even asking.
Yeah. Let's get some examples of this crazy little section.
For example, are you quiet or gregarious? I'm sorry.
What?
I've never heard the word gregarious in my life. I am an educated human being that doesn't know what that means.
And the crazy thing too is they're creating this test so that a lot of people can take it. And if anyone knows about what it takes to create like surveys or forms for people, you got to make sure that the words you throw on can be understood by everyone and that there's not multiple definitions between people.
Definitely.
So,
what about this one? Benefits or blessings?
That one really tripped me up because I'm sorry. What does that mean? Could someone please explain to me the difference between benefits and blessings?
I think the weird thing with how this is set up is in your mind, the words are supposed to be opposite.
Yes.
Right? Like some of them are. For instance, there's quiet or outgoing.
Yeah.
Theory or certainty. But then you start getting weird ones again, convincing or touching.
And why is there touching?
Compassionate or logical?
The other thing too, they use compassionate so much. So they actually reuse a lot of these words.
They do.
And I think that the testing technique that they do for that they're trying to employ at least, is that they want you to compare one word to multiple different other words.
To see if you are truly holding on to that emotion.
Exactly. And that's something you see that in a variety of different surveys and, reputable tests. So
here's an instance of that back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Question 80 is, are you big-hearted or firm-minded? Question 81 is, are you fair-minded or caring?
Like, to me, fair-minded and caring,
that's the same thing.
Yeah. Like, are you, excuse me?
Do you make or create?
Yeah, that's another thing that really tripped me up.
That's describing the same thing.
It's like making and creating. they try to create this difference between people that are more eclectic and more feely, emotion-y, free spirited, but they do so in such a weird way that people that are that look at it and they say, what am I filling out? What survey is this? How is this going to even help me?
I think they're also just asking the same exact question over and over again in a different mask.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's so annoying because after you've gone through all 93 of them, you feel like you've answered like 4 questions because that's all they're testing for.
Exactly. Like it's 4
always,
metrics.
Like, here's another one. So this is part 3. Which answer comes closest to describing how you usually feel or act? So now we're in our feelings zone.
Ooh.
Question number 67. At parties, do you do most of the talking or do you let others do most of the talking? But in part 1, they asked, at parties, do you sometimes get bored or always have fun? Why are they so interested in how you are at parties?
They need to know if you're an extrovert, honey, and extroverts go to parties.
Oh, you're right. Extroverts can only always have fun and do all of the talking. And introverts always get bored and do none of the talking.
Introverts live in shadows and dark places and never talk to another human being.
So true.
As an extrovert, I would know that because I've never seen an introvert.
You know, some say that you never will. You'll never see them coming.
I want to go to my favorite bit of this test, though.
Okay.
Which is the scoring, because if any of you can tell.
The scoring is absolutely ridiculous. Quick side note.
Yes.
When I was in this course in college, this was so difficult for each student to understand how to score it that our professor just thought we were stupid. He could not believe that we couldn't figure out the scoring. But I'm going to show you all this in up close and personal because it is insane. And they offer little to no instruction. So it's this sheet that says count the number of X's in each row, enter the total for each row in the shaded area at the end of the row. And the problem that happened for me when I was taking the test is my X's and my marks, they didn't bleed all the way through.
And it's because it uses when you fill out those receipts, the pressure paper, it uses the same thing for this test.
Right.
And one of my favorite little details about it is that it's all misaligned. So
every single
one is off. So the only way to know what your answer was is to look in the upper right corner of each box, because your answer might be out of the box. It might not even be close to it. And after going through 93 questions, the last thing you want to do is work back through the test.
I think that's what I did. I went back through every question and I had to make my X's deeper on the mark. And at that time, I was just so sick of it.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to know my answer.
This is the worst BuzzFeed quiz in the world.
It really is.
Like, it is so wretched, and it sucks the soul out of you that at a certain point, just getting those 4 letters feels relieving because you know it's over. And I think that that's why people like this thing.
Well, I think we talked about this earlier, is that this Myers-Briggs is just a horoscope for the corporate world. That's all it is. Because you do all this work and then you get this little booklet and it just gives you this long, almost beautifully written paragraph about your characteristics, who you are at your best, how others see you, and then your potential areas for growth. And then it also gives what career you should be involved in.
The career bit's wild. I actually really quickly want to touch on the profiles for each personality type, because when my results have changed, and I will actually talk about why that is, or I think
that's pretty common.
Yes, actually 50% of people experience a different result on a subsequent test even when those tests are only 5 weeks apart. So if you take this test a month later with a group of 20 people, 10 of them are going to have a different result, which shows that it is not a valid test because it doesn't have, like, your subjects are changing every single time. It's not a great test.
Right. And if you're going in a different headspace, you might answer things differently. I couldn't say because I have gotten the same result every time I've taken it. INFJ probably says something about me.
Yeah. So I want to so the brief bit about this booklet, because this booklet is wild. If you read through one of the pages, which I did after I got my entire personality and life sorted out through this assessment.
And what was your personality?
I believe that I was an ENFP.
So you're an extrovert.
I'm an extrovert.
Intuition, feeling and perceiving.
Yes.
So why don't I give a little read of who you are?
Mm-hmm.
Warmly enthusiastic and imaginative.
Wow.
Make connections between events and information very quickly.
Ooh.
And confidently proceed based on the patterns they see. Want a lot of affirmation from others and readily give appreciation and support. Spontaneous and flexible. Often rely on their ability to improvise and their verbal fluency.
Wow.
Can you, that applies to any human being who's listening to that.
And if you go through all those pages and you start reading the profile for one personality and then another, they all read the exact same.
Just like a horoscope.
I think that this is worse than a horoscope too, because at least some of the horoscope stuff is imaginative.
Well, I think this does too. This is just the little write-up, but when
I'm talking about the big write-ups.
Okay,
there's a lot of similarities between them. And yes, of course, there's
a lot of similarities between the horoscopes too, is what I'm saying. Is anyone can read that paragraph and resonate with at least one part of it.
It's the confirmation bias.
I am not ENFP at all, but I would like to believe that I'm imaginative.
Right.
And make connections between events and information quickly, and that I can be confident with the patterns I make. And, I do need affirmation from others, and I would like to readily give appreciation and support. I would like to, okay, you know what? Why does it say you're spontaneous and flexible?
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense.
Flexibly,
and I'd like to believe that I'm verbally fluent. Verbal fluent?
Verbal fluent.
I'm verbal fluent.
You know words.
So I think to really put this to the test, I'm going to read you mine for INFJ.
Okay.
And tell me if any of this resonates with you, because you're pretty much the exact opposite. The only thing we share is intuition.
That's true.
So, INFJ.
Mm-hmm.
Seek meaning and connection in ideas, relationships, and material possessions. Want to understand what motivates people and are insightful about others. Conscientious and committed to their firm values. Develop a clear vision about how best to serve the common good. Organized and decisive in implementing their vision.
Wow. I could resonate with about half of them at least.
At least. And to be honest, I don't even resonate with half. I'm reading this here and I don't think that really describes who I am. So now I am so puzzled by you, Myers-Briggs. I certainly want nothing to do with you. I
feel like the ultimate way to just prove to yourself how ambiguous this stuff is you take the labels off of all of those descriptions and you try and sort them into all 16 personalities. Do you think you could do it?
I'm confused what you're even asking.
So we had that page there, right? Where we have all 16 personalities, little descriptions.
Yes.
If we took the label off, like INFJ, EF,
and
whatever,
I had to match the little paragraph.
Could you do it? Do you think you could?
There is absolutely no way.
Because to me, gun to my head, I'll tell you to pull the trigger on that. I could not figure that one out. And something that I think is really required for something where you are defining 16 explicit personality types is that you can read a definition and point to the word. Otherwise, it's kind of meaningless.
It does feel very meaningless at the end of the day, I think is what I take away
Yes.
from this more than $100 experience I was forced to engage with.
And if you want any more bits about how wacky this thing is, I had a scoring nightmare with this. And it wasn't because of the marks. I could kind of figure out the marks. I could kind of figure out the tallying. And I made sure that I had all of my stuff tallied properly so I could get the right read on what career I should have.
Right, because you needed to know if you were needed to go into computers or not.
Yes. The scoring of this I had trouble with because for one of the metrics I had a tie. And for another one, I had 2 points difference between them. So I had 11 for one and 13 for the other, meaning if I switched one answer for those metrics, I would have had 2 ties on my test. 2 ties.
And do they acknowledge that ties are a thing when you're filling it out?
Yeah,
Oh,
because
well, that's good.
they have tie-breaking rules.
Oh.
Which I'm sure are backed up by tons and tons of research.
Oh, absolutely. They would not make any rules that weren't backed up by science.
No, this would not be a pseudoscientific thing. So the
Never.
tie-breaking rules are if you have the same amount of extroversion and extroversion and introversion, then you're an introvert. The funny bit about it, though...
Wouldn't you be an ambivert?
The funny bit about it, though, is it's impossible to tie on that metric because it is the only metric that has an odd number.
And you tied on it?
No.
Oh.
I'm just saying, like, there is no, like, they don't even keep track of their own numbers. The tie-breaking rule should not apply for extrovert or introvert, but they still have a tie-breaking rule about it. The other thing, though...
I wonder if they have that there for people who just calculate incorrectly.
I think so. And it just shows how much they care about the truth.
You know what? They're people pleasers.
They're people pleasers.
At the end of the day, if Myers-Briggs had to answer its own questions, it would come out as a people pleaser.
Yeah, which works really well for the kind of training environments that they throw these into.
Definitely.
They have all these tiebreakers. I had to figure out that between judging and perceiving, if they're tied, then I'm perceiving.
You're a perceiver.
And then they also have this score thing where they show how strong each of your attributes are. And for you, this is what makes sense for you getting similar results every single time. You were clear on introversion and intuition. You were moderate with feeling, and then clear with judging. And clear is the second highest metric. It means that you almost answer every single one in favor of one versus the other. Mm. Mine were moderate, clear, slight. Slight is the lowest. Moderate is the 25 to 50% bit. Mm. So it just shows that mine's just a big old wet noodle of an answer.
You're a different personality on a different day. Makes sense because you're a Gemini.
Yes, that makes sense because I'm a Gemini. To use another personality heuristic on this one. So let's get into the careers because I'm done looking at this scoring thing because it gives me nightmares.
So under career interests, it says, this set of preference combinations influences career interests and choices. These are the 4 columns of the type table. So we have ST, SF, NF, and NT.
Yes.
So I think I'm NF.
I'm
INFJ. What is your 2 middle?
I gotta double
check.
What
are your middle initials?
I'm NF and you are NF as well.
Oh, so
we're the same. We should have the same career.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Myers-Briggs tells us that we need to focus on possibilities over facts. We need to, while handle these, but this doesn't make any sense. Can't even read it. Handle these by applying attention to people's potential over theoretical concepts, personal warmth, or objective analysis.
To me, this perfectly illustrates one of the things that makes Myers-Briggs so effective with making people feel like it's a profound thing. They'll throw in big words that the summation means nothing. Like there's no point being drawn there, but it's just tricky enough and just academic-y enough where it feels like something is being said. So if you're not interested in personality types or psychology or these sorts of scoring systems, then to you, it just flies right over your head. It's like, oh, that's
Like,
interesting.
I guess that works.
But my goodness. Okay.
We need to be insightful and enthusiastic instead of sympathetic, practical, or logical.
Abandon all logic if
That's
you're an
what we are.
NF. NF stands for no facts.
We find scope for our interests in understanding and encouraging people. For practical help, technical skills, or theoretical and technical frameworks. Just so you know.
Okay, good to know.
Drum roll, please. These are the careers we are advised to go into.
Give me computers. Give me computers.
Psychology. Human resources. Teaching. Research. Literature. Religious service. Healthcare. And art and music. The interesting thing is teaching is on several. Law is on several. Engineering is on several. Research is on several. So at the end of the day, I think that you can just blindly pick a career and boom, you're good to go.
Could I see this? Because
certainly
there are some fascinating career choices that we could take.
That we could consider.
Because if Myers-Briggs is going to dictate the rest of my life.
As it should and will.
As it properly should, I should know what's possible out there.
Right.
So my favorite thing that I've been alluding to, and if I was an NT instead of an NF, I could have a career as a computers.
Interesting. You know, wasn't this last revised in the 80s or 90s?
I don't know about this particular printout.
Because if it was, the computers would make sense.
Computers would make sense then. But it just says computers. Also,
film isn't mentioned. There are so many careers that just, you know what? They don't exist.
I think what's a bit funny to look at too is what exists in one category but not multiple. So if you're an ST, business administration, banking, law enforcement, like
that is
and applied science.
Very troubling.
I will say that for applied science, I have a really hard time distinguishing that from physical science, which is another career.
This is what's the gray area of this test is get me Google, because I cannot decipher the difference between those for the life of me.
You have to outsource to understand what they're even talking about.
Maybe that's a skill. Maybe that's a career.
Yeah.
Outsourcer.
What happens? What personality type do I acquire if I don't like my personality type?
I think that you just have to...
Do I have to pay them more money to figure out what I really am?
Well, and that's the interesting thing is when I went on their website to get the original digital test, I was so amazed at how huge the Myers-Briggs universe is. Because I was under the impression that it was just Myers-Briggs test, or to be official, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Assessment, MBTI. I thought that's all they offered. But I was so wrong.
You know, it was really weird trying to get information about Myers-Briggs because, as I'll get into with my little notes here, when looking up information about Myers-Briggs, there is like the parent company of a bunch of institutions because they own an academic journal where they publish all their research into.
Is it called Myers-Briggs?
It's like, I forget exactly what it's called. You can find it on Wikipedia because that's one of the biggest reasons why people refute the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. And yeah, so like if you're looking up anything about this test, you will find yourself on multiple different domains that all allude to Myers-Briggs.
Very outdated and difficult to use, I might add.
And it looks like the relics of rebranding or fragmenting this organization over and over again to adapt to a new consumer base or whatever they have it. And so you kind of get the impression that while looking up information about it, you're doing half decent research because you're crossing multiple different outlets and the information's really similar between a bunch of them. You're not really finding too much of a dissenting opinion. And so
you trust it, is what you're saying.
it sets people up to trust it.
Right.
Now, here's why you shouldn't trust this thing. Here is why this thing is just really a hot piece of garbage.
Okay.
I'm going to go through 3 general things to think about. I'm first going to talk about the test itself and its validity. We've kind of touched on a few of the things right now or earlier in this episode, but I just want to reiterate from
With
my
some
research.
hard, cold facts.
With some cold, hard facts. The other thing, too, is I want to touch on the cost of everything. We've alluded to it, but the cold, hard facts are a bit sickening.
Before we begin with this, I just wanted to reiterate and give some examples of why and how this test is even used. Typically, it's used, as listed in the booklet, for self-understanding and development, team building, management and leadership training, coaching, organizational development, diversity and multicultural training, problem solving, career development, academic counseling, education, and relationship counseling.
There is nothing this test can't do.
This test is the ultimate self-help.
You know, okay, so the sections that I'm going to go over, so test, cost, and then the last one is the culture side of it. It would make me so happy if there's a podcast that I really like, If Books Could Kill. If they could cover Myers-Briggs for a full episode, I would weep tears of joy. They've talked about it a little bit here and there, and that's, I think, what inspired me to get into it. But yeah, so here are some of the cold, hard facts when we talk about the test. Fact number 1, no major journal has published research on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So that means that in the world of psychology, you have major journals, like your most reputable bases for any sort of psychology discovery. None of them have reported on this test. It's not rooted in the field of psychology.
And you can't even chalk it up to, oh, it hasn't been around that long. No, this test is going to have a 100th birthday soon.
Yeah, like kind of really soon. And like the philosophy that it's built off of is now 100 years old. And think about all the things within the social sciences that have changed over that period of time. Very few great minds in social science have been 100% right about things. I would say
no one has been 100%
no one's been 100% right about things.
And definitely in the last 100 years, we have just as a world have changed the study of psychology so much.
Yes.
And so you can't chalk it up to how old it is. So it really makes you wonder why they haven't investigated or validated it.
And a funny detail I found about this is that there is a Stanford professor, or I'm going to start this from the top because this is probably worth clipping. There is a Stanford professor that is on the board of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Foundation, or whatever the parent company is. They publish their own psychology research, right? And when asked, why don't you publish research about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator? They said, because it would get them laughed out of the room. It would not be taken seriously in the world of psychology. And it would invalidate a lot of their research. So
what are they doing on the board?
It's to validate Myers-Briggs. That's all it is.
Or they're getting a nice fat paycheck from it. They
probably get a nice old paycheck.
So that makes me feel like those either studying psychology currently or have been in the field for a while just like laugh at this test consistently. It must be a running joke in that community. If any of you are in that field of study, please let us know, because I'd like to know the inner gossips of why this test is eligible for laughing stock.
It has so many memeable elements
but
to it.
But it's weird because in preparation, I always go to TikTok for my search engine. That's just kind of my new thing I do. And I looked up Myers-Briggs test because I was interested to see what other people thought of it. And it was beloved. It was so difficult for me to find the tiniest critique, let alone a bad review of this test, which I thought was really concerning because there were, on TikTok, how there's like the psychologists and the doctors, and you're always a little iffy because you don't really know if they're doctors or not.
Yes.
There were a fair amount of people allegedly in that field that praised this. And a lot of them were saying, don't take the 16 personalities test, the free version of this, because it's not accurate and it won't give you the same information that Myers-Briggs can.
It doesn't take enough of your money to work.
Which, that's just, I'm so skeptical of that. Because, some of the questions might legally have to be different, but I would assume that they're getting at the same thing. And so it makes me feel like they're paid to say that.
No. They wouldn't do that.
That was kind of a big surprise to me because the people in my life who have taken this are very iffy about it, but the online perception was very much the opposite. So I'm wondering if that's just controlled by the company or if people don't know the history of it and have never thought to question this test before.
So measuring a personality in a similar way to Myers-Briggs, it does exist in the world of psychology. There is this thing called the 5-factor theory that breaks down human personality into 5 general factors. The most important thing for us to remember is that this is to help us understand or break down dimensions of a person or parts of their personality. That's all it is. It's a tool to help think about who we are.
It's a starting point, essentially.
It's a starting point. And so the Ocean model uses openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The Hexaco model, which is a 6-factor model, adds one more, adds honesty and humility to it.
I like that.
And between these two models, the only thing that they have in common with Myers-Briggs in terms of the way that people score and the correlations between them is the extroversion part. Nothing else lines up with Myers-Briggs. That means that Myers-Briggs as a test is only reliable for introversion or extroversion. Everything else is nonsense, gibberish.
Which I would still challenge because now this is like the 3rd or 4th time I've said it, but being an introvert and an extrovert is so subject to change. And I don't think it's fair to put people in those opposite boxes, especially like I would say that I am quite the extreme introvert, but I'm not always like that.
So that's where the Ocean and Hexaco models are different. They're not binaries at all. They're just measurements. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say your extroversion is? Because not everyone's going to say that I'm a 10 or a 1.
It's a scale instead of a definite.
Once again, we are starting to see the issue of taking complex social ideas and throwing them into a binary. So here's a little fun fact about the Myers-Briggs personality test. 50% of people get a different result the second time they take this test.
You already said that.
Okay. Well, it's in the notes.
Cut that.
Cut that. The other important thing when dealing with some binary to measure things, what you would expect if a bunch of people take this is that you would have 2 spikes in scores. One for your extroversion and one for your introversion. Those 2 spikes in a distribution, the proper term is a bimodal distribution. It basically means you can draw a line and it would make sense. None of these metrics work on that. There is no bimodal distribution for any of the metrics in Myers-Briggs. That means that it's just one big old heap and bell curve. People are pretty normal and they lie anywhere on it. That's why I was able to score right in the middle of 2 different things because I'm just a dude.
So you might as well be 4 or 5 or 10 of these personalities at least.
At least. And my favorite little quote that showed up in this is, "It has as much insight and validity as a Buzzfeed quiz." This was in a BBC article that built off of a Vox article about Myers-Briggs.
Do you know what year that was?
That was
published?
That was published in 2014.
I was going to say, sounds like 2010s era.
Yeah.
To me, which is so funny because BuzzFeed quizzes are so fun to take. But I mean, everyone knows that it's just BS and it's just a time waster. But at least those are free. At least people don't have to build their careers or do like leadership and diversity training off of it.
There's no cash grab with it. It's campy and
It's
ridiculous.
just silliness.
It's silly and it's fun. It doesn't hurt anyone. And I think that BuzzFeed quizzes got a lot of bad press for being a bit silly and over the top. But at least it's not Myers-Briggs.
At least that they were honest about it.
Because
Myers-Briggs is hiding behind a psychology.
they have the little like golden ratio spiral-y shell thing that you see on math textbooks. It's science.
Oh my gosh, it does. It really does look like a textbook.
It's cosplaying as academic literature. You want to know how widespread Myers-Briggs is?
Boy, do I.
10,000 companies use Myers-Briggs. 2,500 colleges and universities use Myers-Briggs. And 200 US government agencies use the test. Chief among them is the military.
That is genuinely terrifying.
The EPA has administered the Myers-Briggs type indicator to an estimated 25% of their 17,000 person workforce. So, I did the numbers on that. It's only 4.25 thousand people.
But that's just one.
But that's
government agency.
One of 200 US government agencies that are doing this. This is where it gets a bit more concerning, though, because we've talked about how this is not really rooted in good psychology. St. Luke's Hospital and Health Network in Pennsylvania has administered it to half of their 8,200 person staff, with 15% of training funds being spent on Myers-Briggs.
It really makes you wonder why. Because what I got from this test is it's trying to push you into a career. And it doesn't make sense for an organization to do that when their employees are already in a career. So what's the point of it? What are they trying to accomplish?
It gets worse.
Oh no.
You want to take a wild guess at how many of the Fortune 100 companies use this test in hiring and training?
Half.
More.
60%.
More.
75.
More.
90.
89 of the Fortune 100 companies use this test in hiring and training. And if you want to check my facts on it, Stromberg and Caswell 2015, that's your source. I believe that was Vox.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
You said hiring.
Hiring and training.
Do you think that this is being used in like job interviews then?
Yes. Because these next three stats are going to knock your knickers off.
Not my knickers.
Not your knickers. Okay. 79% of HR professionals reported using personality assessments in external hiring. If you can get through a hiring process without taking a personality assessment, good job. So this is not just Myers-Briggs. This is personality assessments
just anything
as a whole.
in general. I've never had to do any of that for a job interview. Have you?
No, mostly because I haven't gotten really any professional career type interviews.
But that's truly something that I've never experienced. Yeah. But that is so weird.
72% of HR professionals reported using personality assessments in internal hiring. So that's like career trajectory stuff. They already know the candidate, they work there, and they administer a test similar to this to see if they would be a suitable leader for the organization.
Well, if you don't get leader on your test,
then you're stuck with computers.
You are toast. Yeah, you might as well just work at computers. That's terrifying though, because people can't know what the HR professional is looking for when they're hiring. So they don't know whether to be honest on their test or not. Maybe that's one of the things they're looking for.
I honestly think that the greatest service we could do to people that might have to take this test and have to take this test in a professional environment is to just highlight how to work through it.
Well, they definitely don't want introverts.
They don't want introverts.
So
You're
have to get
extroverted.
it. You have to get an E. You know what? Let's go through and what do you think is the prime corporate personality? You have to be extroverted.
Speaking of corporate personality in this, I have one final stat on the prevalence, though, is that 79% of, so those first two HR specific stats, they were from this big survey that was done. 79% of people that answered this full survey, corporate type survey,
yes,
reported using personality assessments in career development programs. So what we're saying right now, this is the corporate training we can provide you all, is how to work through this assessment so that you don't get categorized as a non-leader, as someone that's difficult to work with others, based off of a pseudoscience.
I am going to come out and say, I assume that ESTJ is the most corporate personality. No hate to anyone if you are an ESTJ. Love the extroverted sensing, thinking, judgingness of you. But just listen to this and tell me if you think an office space would be looking for this.
Okay.
ESTJs like to organize projects, procedures, and people, and then act to get things done. They live by a set of clear standards and beliefs, make a systematic effort to follow these, and expect the same of others. They value competence, efficiency, and results. There is no room for inspiration, art, feelings, no intuition here.
If you can become good robot, if you can follow all rules and create rules for others and manage people while doing so, and find key performance indicators to boost your business, increase sales, and make
ROI.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
That really is.
Hearing all these stats about how prevalent this is in workplaces is just, it's wild. And there's a lot of the whole space of researching corporate workplaces is really interesting, because a lot of things like this, they leak into those spaces. They present as really valid.
They do. Because
really official.
There's no reason for you to question this test, especially if it's given by a place of authority you trust, like a boss in a workplace.
Exactly.
It's the same thing as when my professor wanted us to do it. Like, you don't question it because you're in a safe environment.
Yeah. And to question it would be so risky too.
Totally.
Like, why would you question this? Your boss is like, hey, can you fill out the Myers-Briggs for us? We just kind of want to see how you think.
You'd have no choice. You just have to do it.
And so I think that this is the perfect way for us to transition into the better assessment.
Our assessment. So with all the Myers-Briggs slander and all the facts you have now, we would like to present our own homemade personality test that we have nicknamed the Cube.
Let's go into how we designed this thing.
So we have a visual here of a cube that Brendan so kindly made and designed. And this all goes back to a year or two ago when my college roommate and I were discussing people who enjoy watching movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm not talking about just a one-off film they'll go see. It's those hardcore people that go to see every single film, know them or love them, hate them or, one. There's definitely one in your life. And we were so puzzled by those people. Not that it's a bad thing. It's something that we don't do. And it really got us thinking about all the people in our life and the personalities that they have. And so we started making quite the long list of questions in our notes app. And I think we eventually wrote it down. And we nicknamed it the Cube.
And it's named the Cube because it was imagined that initially it was 2 metrics. It was a compass, north, south, east, west sort of thing. And then by the time we hit the third, it just turned into a cube, and that's what it was. No matter how many additional things we add, it's still the cube.
It will always be a cube.
And so the cube is interesting because our assessment uses 6 questions.
Not 93.
Not
just
93,
6.
just 6. And it is designed specifically so that you have a clear answer every single time.
There's no, sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that. It's, you will know in your gut what your true answer is.
And the best part about all of this is if we open up the workbook and we get into here, we have our own scoring card that is much easier to follow than the Myers-Briggs scorecard, because all you have to do is go question by question and follow your answers, and you will get your type. Because of our questions, each of them being binary, and there being 6, that means we have 64 personalities. So take that, Myers-Briggs.
64 personalities, not 16. And I will say, I know we hated on binary questions, but we designed these so that there are obvious answers. And so I think it refutes that a little bit. Yeah, we're not saying we made the greatest test, people. Okay, we're just saying we have something that you can certainly answer and measure yourself with and go out into the world and do with it what you will.
And that's the real goal. We're just here to have people introspect.
Because all this test does is give you a name. It's not going to give you what career you should go into, if you're an introvert or an extrovert, blah, 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 blah. You will be assigned a name, and that's it.
Yes. So without further ado, what is your first question? If I want to know more about myself.
If you really would like to reflect, the first thing I would ask you is, do you enjoy watching movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
To be honest, I'm going to answer no. I've tried. I have given it a good effort. I like sci-fi. I like the concept of superheroes. I only ever watched after the first couple Marvel movies. I think after the second Avengers movie, I only ever watched them on airplanes. It's a great airplane movie.
So your answer is no.
So I am a no.
Okay, moving on to question number 2. Do you keep butter on the counter or in the fridge?
I keep it in the fridge. I've never had a counter butter situation.
What an absolute sin.
I know.
Next question. Question number 3. Do you prefer curtains or blinds?
I like blinds for a couple reasons. I like just having the little string that you can pull down one single place to just get it up or get it down. I also like being able to do the twist thing and have the slats move.
Let the sunlight in.
Yeah.
And that way you fully know whether people can see you or not.
Exactly.
Question number 4. Do you or would you enjoy the sport of ultimate frisbee?
I think I would. I have.
You'd be a frisbro.
I would toss a frizz. I've never played ultimate frisbee in like a rec league type environment, but I think that if I was thrown in that situation, I would find enjoyment in it.
So yes.
Yes.
Question number 5. When in a public bathroom, do you choose to linger and let other people leave before you do your business? Or do you do your business proudly and then leave?
I think that I'm much more of a lingerer.
You're a little shy.
And part of it is being shy. Part of it's just, it's nice to have a little closed off stall to hang out in.
It's your place of solace.
It's my place of solitude.
Get some breathing in.
Yes.
Okay. Number 6, final question. When you're at a restaurant and a waiter or waitress brings an order of food to you and it's incorrect, do you send the food back or do you eat it and say nothing?
You know, it would be very difficult for me to send that food back. It would have to have a stinky sock in the middle of it for me to send it back. You're
eating it.
I'm eating it. I would suck it up and eat it.
Okay. So with that in mind, let's go through our scoring and see what personality you have. And then we'll flip and do mine.
Okay. So if I go through, I have fridge butter, I use blinds, I frisbee, I eat the food, linger in the bathroom, don't like Marvel movies. I'm the investigator.
And that's it, folks. That is truly the only information you get from this test. Nothing more to it than that.
Literally nothing more. And for some reason, I feel better after doing this. It was 6 questions, got it over with.
Do you feel like you really know yourself? Do you identify with being an investigator?
I like investigating some things. I like getting to the bottom of certain happenings and who's what's it's.
Very nice.
So I think this should be in everyone's hands now.
Every corporation in America. Should we just replace Myers-Briggs with our test?
I think we should.
People pay $60 to take it.
I think that we make people pay money to take it only if they've paid money for Myers-Briggs. So if you have been able to opt out of the Myers-Briggs world, it's free. But in a Myers-Briggs type corporate training environment, this thing is $1 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. But I'll give it to you for $1 million.
Well, that's a steal.
Okay. Let me ask you these questions too, because as we know, this is probably the most revealing, most accurate personality assessment on the market right now. I just valued it at $1 million.
At least.
Or $1 billion, but right now on discount for $1 million.
Right.
Do you enjoy watching Marvel movies?
Absolutely not. I hate every single Marvel movie that's ever come out. I've seen like 1 or 2, and I find them incredibly insufferable.
Do you keep butter on the counter or in the fridge?
On the counter. I think it is so ridiculous that people keep butter in the fridge.
Do you prefer curtains or blinds?
Curtains. Blinds make me want to die. In fact, I uninstalled every single blind. Blinds?
Yeah.
I took out every single blind in our apartment because they icked me so bad and replaced them with curtains.
This is true.
Sorry for curtain boy over here.
Yeah.
I mean, blinds boy over here.
You know, I'm just blind to the truth.
So true.
Do you enjoy the sport of ultimate frisbee?
Absolutely not. I would never be caught dead with frisbee in my hand unless I was throwing it for real.
Do you linger in public bathrooms?
I will say this one was difficult for me because a couple years ago, I was such a big lingerer. I was so shy in public bathrooms. But then one day I just woke up and something changed. I no longer shy away in public bathrooms. I get in and I get out. I'm a leaver.
You're a leaver.
That's
impressive. I wish I had your courage.
One day.
One day. And final question. Do you send food back at a restaurant if they got your order wrong?
Absolutely not.
What would it take for you to send food back?
Nothing.
There's nothing that could make you send it back.
I can't do it because I would be so embarrassed. I can barely talk to people in wait staff as it is without being like, you're doing so great. Like, I know you don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I can't. Wow. I remember a couple months ago, I was visiting my parents and we went to a Mexican restaurant and I ordered enchiladas, no rice, because I am very, very allergic to the rice.
This is very true.
And my order came out and the enchiladas looked fantastic, but there was rice on top of my enchiladas. And I said nothing and I ate it. It was miserable. It was absolutely miserable.
It just ruined your next several days of existence.
It really did. So if that can't make me send it back, I don't know what will.
That's tough.
So I eat it.
Do you want to know what this makes you?
I do.
This makes you the tasteful.
The tasteful. Knew it.
I think that it would be doing a disservice to our community to not share some of these other names, though.
I think so, too.
Would you like to pick out one of your favorite names that we came up with and then describe the personality?
Ooh, I would. I personally like... There are so... Oh, this one is just beautiful. The Tarnisher.
The Tarnisher.
So if you are the Tarnisher, that means that you do enjoy Marvel movies. You leave your butter on the counter. You like curtains. You do not like frisbee or disc golf. And you eat the food. And you linger in the bathroom.
There's this weird pattern of 4 that we found while working through these, where it's either you linger in the bathroom and eat the food, you leave the bathroom and send back the food. Like those are like your 2 kind of polar opposites. And then you have these weird middle grounds between leave the bathroom but eat the food, and then linger in the bathroom and send back the food. The linger in the bathroom and send back the food is the funniest thing ever to me.
It's so silly because let's break down what each of these questions are actually measuring.
Yes.
So question 1, the do you enjoy watching Marvel movies? That's getting at your perception of art and culture. What do you value in art and what do you not?
It's not
plain and simple.
And even though you have your own opinion, none of these are meant to say one is better than the other.
It just is.
It just is. Like some people, the people that like Marvel movies and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe go on liking that. But I think it's important to realize that's a huge like cross section in people's cultural enjoyment. There's like a big group that loves it, and there's a lot of people that are pretty indifferent.
Or very anti, such as myself.
Yes.
The next question about butter really gets at your geography, how and where you were raised. Because I've noticed that a lot of people just in America in general who either don't have European parents or have really no influence outside of the US think it is so weird and disgusting to have butter like out on a counter.
Yes.
Because when we first came up with this question a year or 2 ago, I remember that you and maybe Sarah were absolutely floored that I liked butter on the counter.
It was a shock to me. And I think that it touches exactly what you're talking about, because Americans refrigerate way more things than anyone else in the world.
Drives me crazy.
We just throw it in the white box with the door.
Because then that must mean it's healthier.
Or it's safe from the ever beating heart of time.
Which is terrifying because I feel like some things are worse off in the fridge, like butter.
Yeah, there's a big argument to be had about each side, and it shows up with eggs too.
Yes,
because the way that eggs are processed in the U.S. versus Europe are entirely different. In the U.S., you have to refrigerate your eggs. In Europe, you do not. And yeah, that's a rabbit hole that's not worth it for this episode.
No,
but if you want to look it up,
that's what it's getting at. So I think that one is incredibly split. It's either you do or you don't. And from the people that we've asked this, they have very, very particular answers and reasons.
And that's the beauty of this assessment is there's no like, are you head fair or
strong far?
Strong. Are you strong far or head far? Like there's no ambiguity there. Either you want that room temperature soft butter or you don't.
Okay, question number 3, do you prefer curtains or blinds? That is really getting at your aesthetic preference, because for me, the thought and the look of blinds makes me want to vomit, and so I had to get rid of them in my home, no matter the purpose, because I recognize that they are very, very useful. But in my world, curtains are just as useful, but in a tasteful, beautiful way.
To me, this is the perfect question for, are you more utilitarian or not esthetician, because that would be wrong.
That's a skincare.
Yes. But are you utilitarian or do you like aesthetic?
Are you function or beauty?
Yeah. Are you function or actually the better way of saying it, function or form? And for me, I'm very much function. I want the function of opening blinds, shutting blinds, seeing a little bit. I want it to be easy, quick, concise. The thing that I don't like about curtains, and this is such a little nitpick because the curtains look wonderful in our apartment. I want to be clear. They look fantastic. But I will say that there's nothing more unsettling than part of the curtain being caught on the little gap on the curtain rod, and you just have to like kind of yank it a little funny. They're not as easy to use as a blind. That being said, though, I have seen some blind nightmares. So
I think it really comes down to how much money you're putting into certain things. And like, I will say that our curtains are not expensive. And our curtain rods are very cheap. So if we were to upgrade one day, that could change in the same way that the blinds in our apartment are so cheap that they barely worked. But there are beautiful like wooden blinds, but that's just not what we had.
I think it would be interesting to ask people if you had the infinite money hack, you go to whatever store is selling the curtains and the blinds, and you could have your pick of the litter, your favorite of all of them, and not worry about the cost, what you end up choosing.
Maybe that's a dimension we need to add to this cube eventually. And that's what we found with the cube is each question can spur into another, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
But we capped it at 6 because we don't want to get to 93.
Yeah.
So question number 4, do you or would you enjoy the sport of ultimate frisbee? This was trying to get at your social tendency, but not in an extroverted, introverted way. It had to be more nuanced than that. It's really measuring if you were to go into an environment that you didn't grow up in or didn't know, would you willingly go into it or would you want to stray away from it? Because with ultimate frisbee, stereotypically it's only played in college. People don't grow up and like at the age of 10, they start on their little team. Maybe nowadays it's more popular, but it's something that is so niche that you can really only get into adulthood.
Yeah, it's a found sport for a lot of people.
Yes. So it has nothing to do with the sport itself. It's more so the nuance of your social planning and tendencies.
Exactly. All right. Next one.
Number 5, the bathroom question. This is getting at your ego and your pride. So are you shy in the bathroom in front of others or are you loud and proud?
I think that it also says like this taps into a bit of the introversion, extroversion bit, just a slight amount, because I think some people like myself find some solace in the bathroom. It's a place for
safe space,
reflection, for exiting an environment. For me, when I would be in really long classes and I'd feel antsy and I'd need to get up and do something, I would just always go to the bathroom. It feels safe to go there and leave whatever I've been focusing on for probably too long.
I hear that, but that is not what the question is asking.
No.
So maybe that's our fault for not being specific enough. It's in like, these are very, very specific. So let me set the scene.
Okay.
If you're in a very, very crowded bathroom, meaning every stall is taken and you're just smack dab in the middle. There's 2 stalls to your right, 2 stalls to your left, and everyone's doing their business. And you have to go number 2 so bad. You've been holding it all day. Do you let it out then and there, or do you wait for the entire bathroom to clear?
Or in the space of let the whole bathroom clear, like try and do it, but quietly.
Ooh, like when people are flushing.
Exactly.
And if you try and do that, you are a lingerer. That's what this is getting at.
And I'm a lingerer for that. One of the most embarrassing things that's ever happened to me, but also probably one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me, was I was getting off the link,
which is Seattle's subway system.
It's the subway system, and I was getting off at the UW Stadium stop. Which, if anyone's ever been there, you got a lot of escalators. You got a lot of upwardsness.
You're in the dungeons down
and
there.
To paint this picture, I had an 8:30 a.m. class. It was early in the morning. I had some coffee. I had my morning waking upness of my body going on, and me being a little groggy, I'm on the escalator, and I let one rip because I thought that there was no one around, and there was someone not even 5 steps down from me who looked up at me and just started cackling with laughter.
I mean, in that moment, how could you not? Wasn't it just the two of you too?
It was just the two of us. It was like very like no one else I could see there because it was early enough where people weren't at the link.
Right.
And it was just the two of us. And I just turned red in embarrassment. And I think I like ended up walking up the next escalator to get some distance.
Aww.
And the guy shows up at the top after me, and he's still laughing, and he tells me it's like this was so funny, like you made my day. And like I texted a couple of my friends what happened, and to me at least that was like that's where I can really laugh about it because it's absurd. I thought that I was getting away with one sneaky little fart, and no, there was a witness.
The funny bit is, I bet that guy tells this story a lot too. It's like it was humiliating for you, but so funny for him.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you can look back at it with some giggles now.
To be honest, I saw it as funny from the jump, but I had to work through my own ego to find the humor more consistently.
Definitely.
It was very funny though. Okay, last question.
So that's what that one's getting at. Okay, question number 6 with the do you send the food back in the restaurant or do you eat it? This is getting at both your awareness of yourself and your awareness of your environment.
Yes.
It's very similar to question 5. I think ego and pride is also tied into that. But I think this one is more so, how are you perceiving others' feelings as well as your own? Are you putting yourself above others or others above yourself?
Because the bathroom bit has an element of privacy, whereas this, you attach a face to this.
Right.
There's also a level of, are you willing to advocate for yourself and what you need in this? I'm not saying sending food back is always the wrong thing to do. It's just not what I would do, because there are some people that feel comfortable saying like, hey, I'm so sorry, this isn't what I ordered.
There's a way to do it too. It's like in my rice example, I wish every day that I had enough courage to say, hey, I'm really allergic to rice. Like, can you please bring me back an order or whatever? Say it probably in a nicer way. Instead of the people like, oh God, wrong order.
Get this away from me.
Useless.
What is this?
Like, so I don't want people to think if they say, oh, I would send the food back, that that's the wrong answer. It's there's nuance to every single question on this, but there's also gut feelings and gut reactions to these answers.
Yeah. And I think that people that would send the food back, they know it in their gut pretty quickly. They're like, yeah, no, I'd feel comfortable sending it back.
Exactly.
Me,
so I think
no way.
That might get at confidence as well.
There's a little, yeah. So there's a little bit of your awareness of self. And again, with all of these, it's not a perfect personality assessment. And no personality assessment is perfect.
I'd say it's better than Myers-Briggs,
but
though.
I would say it has just as much scientific validity as Myers-Briggs. The cube is fantastic pseudoscience.
All hail the cube.
All hail the cube.
Before we go, I do want to read off just some of these personality types, because we are going to make a TikTok filter or some way to take this test so that you can find your truest personality and self. I'm not going to tell you the answers to get this. I'm going to let you wonder, but I'm going to read some of my favorite. The snacker, the authority, the lurker, the stinker, the defiant, the goblin, the ghoul, the bushwhacker, the scavenger, the unaware, the goober, the gremlin, the growler, the speedster, The quirkster.
I'm starting to realize, like,
the mollusk.
The mollusk. Oh, and we also have the crustacean.
And last but not least, the tumbleweed. And again, there are 64 possibilities. It is very, very likely that you will not get the same result as your friend. Even if you go in thinking like, oh, I know what I'm going to be. I promise you, you don't. Anything is possible. There is a personality out there for you. If you are feeling unheard and unseen by the Myers-Briggs test, the cube is here for you.
It is the solution.
Long live the cube.
All hail the cube.
I think Rue likes it too.
All hail the cube.
All hail the cube.
All hail the cube. I will say, though, I could take this test in a month from now, in a year from now, in 2 years from now even, and I would almost guaranteed get the same result.
Right. I think the only kind of questionable one is the bathroom. So we might need to tweak that a little bit because that could be situational.
But we also know that personality is dynamic and it changes as you grow too. So that's the other big issue.
Maybe if you're going through a really rough time in your life, you should take a personality test.
That's what Buzzfeed told an entire generation.
It's the only way to know if you're truly struggling or not.
Oh, actually, I have one great quote to wrap this all up with.
Let's hear it.
Okay, because the idea that you were just saying is like, if you're feeling lost and you need some sort of direction, take a personality test. And Myers-Briggs works as therapy light for some people because they're forced to introspect a little bit. And introspection tends to be a big part of therapy. So it's like, oh, I finally understand who I am. I'm one of the 16 personalities. Thank God.
I was so worried I wasn't.
So this quote comes from the Scientific American, published in 2018. And it says, there are other reasons why Stein thinks some personality assessments may be pseudoscientific. What those tests will tell people is true or false is determined by what people are willing to pay for, he says. Their process as a company is to tell people whatever will sell their product. So you got to keep in mind, Myers-Briggs will tell you whatever you want to hear so they can get the sale because they're not, it's not research. It's a company.
They're not in the business of genuinely trying to help people. They're in the business of trying to sell as many tests as possible. And after that, maybe selling some training and counseling. Once you know your personality type, yes, here's where you go next.
You can administer the test to people.
A pipeline, if you will.
It feels like an MLM a little bit.
And the Cube would never do that to you.
Cube doesn't do that. All hail Cube.
It might be $1 million to take. But
no, it's $1 million to buy the rights to the Cube.
Oh,
Yeah. This is right now, because we're documenting all this, it's ours. Intellectual property. Try and take it from us.
You can't.
You can't take the Cube. Well, you can take the Cube, but you can't take the Cube.
But go ahead and take the Cube test. If you are curious and willing to go down a rabbit hole of introspection, the Myers-Briggs test can't be there for you, but the Cube can.
So The Guardian in 2013 published an article that has this fantastic quote. Many users of the MBTI believe that a straightforward test can simplify them to the point where they can be managed, controlled, and utilized to make them as efficient and productive as possible. It's no wonder businesses are keen to embrace something like that. It would be the ideal tool if it were guaranteed to achieve this. So it's trying to sell people that we can be made so simple.
There's no nuance to anyone, especially in the workplace. That's why when these HR professionals are using it, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Well, the Cube
wouldn't do that.
The Cube can't.
So let's hit our closing thoughts. Now that we have dissected Myers-Briggs through 93 of our own personal questions, what are your thoughts on the test? And what does this tell you about the world we live in?
Ooh, obviously, I think the test is pretty horrible. Going through it and taking it several times myself, it's just been a bad experience. And I was saddened, but not surprised, to learn how fake it is. And I thought it was really sad to hear that the company itself is pretty much funding all of its own research and publishing its own journal so that people, like, they're putting in a lot of effort to make sure people don't learn and understand that this test is fake. What about you? What are your thoughts? Because I know that you hadn't taken this before.
I hadn't taken the official one. I took 16 personalities, so it's not the real test because I didn't pay for it. But now that I've taken the real test, I prefer 16 personalities. Better user experience, but that's another argument.
I thought that test was actually pretty good.
They give you a fun little character too, and they say what real people and what fictional characters are like your personality. That's very fun to me.
I think it's more BuzzFeedy.
Yeah.
It's for the younger people.
And it has just as much scientific validity as Myers-Briggs. So to me, at least, it taught me two things. One, it taught me about how misinformation can really perpetuate itself through a corporate environment or just through popular science in general. There's a lot of popular science things that people believe that just aren't true, but are very much cultural artifacts that we're very close to encountering, but we never actually follow through with understanding where they come from. Myers-Briggs is fantastic for that. Get to the bottom of it. You realize that it's a bunch of malarkey, and that's kind of fun.
And that's our opinion. I do want to say, feel free to take this test and be proud to take the test. You can do your own research on this. All of the things you have presented were fairly easy to find, if I understand correctly. And you can form your own opinion on the test. This is our opinion. We think that some people might share that and might be happy to have learned a thing or two about it. But I just want to share that you are 100% free and allowed to have your own opinion on this. And if you love Myers-Briggs test, good for you.
And with that being said, thank you for joining us this week on the Can I Tell You Something podcast.
Yes, episode 6.
We look forward to hearing all of your thoughts on this episode. We also have a wonderful episode coming up that involves the fabulous women.
Ooh, yes, we are going to have our first guests ever on the podcast. So we're excited to see how that will go. And we hope to see you all next week.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.